Hey, what's happening, guys? Dan Darrow here with another Options and Play video update. Cruising through the week, we've had plenty of big names to report, and what's actually one of maybe the more interesting developments has nothing to do with earnings. It's the debut of Uber options, right? So the stock went public last week, and this week we get options listed. So kind of figured this was coming. We've had some recent IPOs that had listed options pretty fast after the IPO. Pinterest, Beyond Meat, just some of like the busier ones. Zoom, right? So I knew they were coming. They dropped today, so I felt like it was a good time to maybe like just talk a little bit about just what I'm looking at, what the options are pricing in. Also because it's going to kind of tie into what I feel like we should go over a little bit more in depth this coming option session on Monday. I wanted to like just kind of like dig into um, options on new issues and some setups to watch. Just because we've had a lot of like bigger IPOs and a lot of like the really crazy action has happened in IPOs, so just a good time to talk about it. So first things first, there aren't any weekly options offered for Uber this week. So the first contract is through next week, and right now pricing in about $3. So through the end of next Friday, about $3, and that's about a 6 sessions, $3 move. Um, Honestly, uh, these uh, options on these recent issues, I feel like they're maybe a little bit more of like a crapshoot because there isn't a lot of historical trading ranges, right, to figure out how to price them. There's really no well-defined areas of supply or demand. You don't really know where like the trading range is going to end up developing. I mean, Uber could break out and run to the 50s, or Uber could break down and sit in the 30s. So when these options first debut, it's a lot more of like a wild card, right? You just really don't know what to expect because the ranges haven't been well defined yet, right? So what I've been, well, a couple of things to watch when it comes to like these IPOs. I feel like there's, I'll go into more in depth on Monday, but I feel like there's kind of like two scenarios. Either things run early, or things pull back and then make a run, right? I mean, I'm not going to talk about things that break down just for the sake of this video. We'll just go over things that run early or things that pull back first and then make a run, right? So in terms of things that run early, Pinterest is a great example, right? So sometimes things just take off and run out of the gate, and in the case of Pinterest, it's more of like you need to wait for a pullback. So like the options weren't listed until the stock was still in like this it's an ascent, and when the options got listed, I mean it basically pulled back right away. So in that case, I mean there's not much you can do because like while the stock was running, the options weren't listed yet, right? So sometimes things take off and rip out of the gate and then pull back. And then what you're watching on a setup like that is whether you get the turn, which it looks like it's doing, right? The turn and then the retest of that momentum fueled high, right? In other instances, you get weakness out of the gate, and then what you're watching. So I mean, Uber obviously is a notable one. Lyft was notable, right? Weakness out of the gate, but just for reference, I'm going to talk about another big IPO that was kind of weak out of the gate. That was Tencent Music, right? So what you're watching on these, the ones that are weak out of the gate, is when they turn the corner. So sometimes it can take a week, or sometimes it could take a couple of days, sometimes it could take a couple of weeks. In Tencent's case, it took about a month. What you want to watch is when it finally starts to turn the corner. You want to be involved when it trades through that IPO price because that's really when the momentum can tend to kick in. So like the IPO high, so the debut, right? So in Tencent's case, it was about 1475. So when it finally traded through that, like those are scenarios where you want to jump in because a momentum can kick in and there's really no defined levels of supply on the upside, right? So that's why you can see like it opened, right, pulled back, consolidated, and then turned the corner. And when it finally got through it, yes, there was a little bit of a head fake, but mostly, I mean, like that's when like the real significant rally kicked in, right? Is when it broke back through like 1475, 15, and then started to take off, right? So for Uber, it's going to fall more into the category of obviously what Tencent Music was, but it hasn't had as deep or as prolonged of a dip. So obviously hit 45, pulled back, well documented. Everybody was talking about it, pulled back, but now it's starting to come climbing back to that high from the IPO, which was around 45. So when Uber trades through 45, that's a scenario where you want to maybe take a look and try for some upside exposure, right? Because those are the patterns when momentum could really kick in, stocks take off, and then like you start to see like those accelerating moves higher as the stock tries to find the new trading range. Okay. Again, wanted to talk about these. We'll go over this a little bit more in depth on Monday. So if you have other questions, come prepared with those. We'll talk about it a little bit more on Monday. But just in terms of early positioning, all right. So let me pull this up. So just in terms of early positioning, let me pull these up here. So to show you, started to see what was interesting to me was some calls really piling up out through next week. So this is next Friday's expiration, the 24th, right? So what you notice is that, I mean, because these weren't listed, this is all new volume today, right? But this really stood out to me as aggressive near-term bullish bets through next week, and there's the 46 calls that really piled up. A couple of big blocks went off. I mean, and that at the moment stands out as really the most notable size. You'll see going out in June, some 41 calls, right? You're starting to see some of like these upside bets piling up. I mean, you did see that in Lyft, so it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work, right? Because Lyft had some sort of similar action, but I just felt that this 46 calls for next week were kind of interesting, especially from like a risk reward perspective, right? Because if Uber does get through that 45 area, then momentum could really kick in, and those 46 contracts could theoretically be in play pretty quick. So that really stood out to me. In addition to like some more like smaller, although good size. Bullish positioning out in like June, July, starting to see just some like upside bets, maybe around the high 40s, 50 area. All right. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to catching up with you guys on Monday. Keep an eye out tomorrow for earnings on the radar. It's Friday, you know what that means. Earnings season is winding down, but there still are interesting one-off names. It seems like each night we at least have like 2 to 3, 4 names that are pretty interesting. Some bigger names too. So still plenty to look forward to. And now we're getting into biotech conference season as well. So there'll be some planning for that this next session. All right. So have a wonderful night, and I'll talk to you guys all tomorrow.